Afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Andrew Harvey. I am the Chief Executive of VMA Group. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Before we get started and before I introduce our fantastic guests here from Sequel Group, I'm just going to talk slowly for the next 60 seconds. As is often the case, just to give everyone time to join the call and get comfortable. We have, as you would expect, lots of people signed up to listen in this afternoon. It's going to be a fantastic conversation. I'm sure there's going to be lots to learn. So, as I say, just a few seconds to allow everyone to join. Whilst we do that, just to say a little bit of a preamble for me. So first off, I'm delighted to be hosting this webinar today with Sequel Group, the fantastic Sequel Group, who are one of the industry's leading employee engagement consultancies. I'm sure many of you will have heard of them before, but perhaps some of you listening today won't have done so. Great opportunity for you to be introduced to them for the very first time. And a massive thank you, obviously, to Nick and Paul for taking the time to chat with us this afternoon. I am going to let Nick and Paul introduce themselves, as I'm sure they will do a far better job of it than I will. But before I do that, just a bit of context, I guess, to the webinars that we run and the webinar in many ways that we are running today. So I'm sure you will all know, many of you will know that VMA Group is a recruitment business, and I myself have worked in communications recruitment now for over 20 years. And I'm a massive believer actually in the value of continued professional development. And I think there's a strong link between continued professional development and those people that perhaps are performing best in the roles that they have. And I think we all know the world is changing around us. Tech continues to change. Politics continues to change. And people often ask me, how can I deal with all of this? And I say, well, actually, I think it comes down to continued professional development. You'll never be in a perfect position in terms of your knowledge, your learning, your career. But actually, if you're doing everything you can to stay abreast and to learn continually, then you'll be in a really strong position no matter the challenges that are thrown at you. And that's why we run these webinars, to support the professional development and the continued professional development of the people that are in our network. And I think there's no better way to learn than learning from some of the other experts out there in our industry that are running consultancies, working with all sorts of clients across the UK and internationally as well, and actually producing their own research and insight, which Nick and Paul are going to share with us today. So I think it's a great opportunity for us all to learn together, and I'm sure there's something that you will all take away from it. One of the things I would say actually is I've hosted lots of different webinars over the years, but the topic of this one today massively resonates with me on many different levels, both in terms of the role that I have and my job day to day. And I'm sure it's going to resonate with a lot of people too that are joining us. So the plan is that Nick and Paul are going to share some stuff with us today and some insight through a presentation that they've put together. Lots to take in. But also, if there's lots there and you want to go back and look at it again, the good news is we are recording it. So as I say, it will be available on our website and on our YouTube channel. And of course, please do feel free to reach out to Nick and Paul directly as well if you want to follow up and talk more about the work they do or the insight that they have. I know that they will be happy to do that. There is lots to say that Nick and Paul are going to go through, but also we are very keen to answer any questions that you have. So please do, as we do when we run these webinars, do put your questions in the chat box at the bottom, and I will do my very best to help facilitate the answering of those questions, perhaps when we get to the end of the presentation. So that's the plan. I think now we've probably got people in and on the call and settled, so we might have one or two more join us, but I think at this point I'm going to hand over to Nick and Paul to introduce themselves and to take us through their presentation. Over to you, chaps.
Great, thank you, Andrew, for that introduction, and hello everybody, thanks for joining us. So today what Nick and I are going to do is share with you some of the most striking things that we've heard in the research projects that we've carried out over the last 6 months or so. Here at Sequel, we've been running communication audits and reviews for around about 16 years now. But in our most recent projects, we've seen one particular trend emerge that has big implications for how we all communicate with our colleagues. So the title of today's session does give the game away somewhat, but of course we're talking about the impact of time pressures on individuals and on their organizations as well. So what behaviors are we seeing from people as they respond to this lack of time? And what are the dangers for their employees? What are the dangers for organizations as well? And most importantly, what can we do about all of that from a communications perspective? So we'll run through all of that and we'll share our recommendations for addressing that particular challenge. And we'll include some quick things you can do to get started, well, this afternoon, really, if you want to do that. But first of all, here's Nick to tell you a little bit, very briefly, about SQL.
Thanks, Paul. Yes, and I promise to be brief, guys. Many of you will be aware of who we are, some might not. But we're SQL, an employee engagement agency, as Andrew said in his very kind intro. We've been around since 2009. We currently work with around 30 clients, and last year we delivered more than 300 projects across the board, which kind of covered our three key areas of expertise, really, which are insight, content, and technology. Our insight arm, run by Paul here, is a strategic partner to clients and researches and audits and measures what we do with clients. Our content arm is the traditional arm of SQL. These are the creatives who create compelling campaigns and channels. And then our tech team are delivering the right technical solutions for our clients. So we're very proud of our kind of under one roof kind of offering for clients. And we're also particularly proud of our client net promoter score of 76 and the value that we bring to the industry as a whole. As Andrew said, you can find out more about us on our socials. By all means, contact us afterwards. But that's a very short intro to SQL. I'm conscious you don't want the big sales spiel at this stage. So thanks. Over to you, Paul.
Okay, so what's become increasingly clear to us in our recent research projects is just how little time many people have to engage with comms during their working day. And that's particularly true if they're working in frontline roles, which may not be a surprise. But on the next few slides, we've got quotes from people working in all kinds of different jobs. This is something that we're seeing across the board. Just to give you an example, there was one project we've worked on over the last few months. In that one, we found that 60% of their people have less than 5 minutes a day to engage with comms. So just 5 minutes a day. They've got that 5-minute window. And that might be to read official emails, to look at an intranet article, to go to an online social community like Viva Engage or WorkVivo, to look at a digital screen or a poster that they've seen on their travels, to watch a video, all of these different things that we put out into the world and we expect people to pay attention to, or at least we hope they will. They've got just 5 minutes to do that. And yes, this particular organization did have quite a few frontline roles, but we've seen similar results in other research projects over the last year as well. And we're not the only people finding this. The latest IOIC research has highlighted 10 minutes as a typical window. And the other day, we saw a Microsoft study that found that 2/3 of people said they struggled to find the time to do their jobs. Now, honestly, I'm surprised it was only 2/3 and it wasn't higher, but that's what the people at Microsoft found. And there was some Axios research as well that found that nearly 2 days of every week is spent dealing with distractions and avoidable meetings. The classic, it could have been an email kind of meeting. Now, these are the kind of things that really crunch the time that we all have available to do our work and to stay up to date as well. And that's all time that's effectively wasted. And what we've seen through our qualitative research is that being so short of time, it's almost making people quite selfish because they don't have the headspace for any information that isn't directly linked to their jobs. If it's not information that helps them to do their job better in that moment, it's almost like they check out, they shut down, they block out what they see as outside noise. And it's not necessarily that people don't care about the wider business or they've stopped caring, but they've decided to prioritize their time or they're just not going to get their work done. That's the priority, just getting their work done. So here we've got a few quotes to bring this to life, and I'll show you what I mean by this. And this is what somebody told us in a focus group recently. And this one really hit me between the eyes, and I think you'll understand why when you see it. But this person said, if the email isn't saying we're going bust, then I don't care. So just think about that for a moment. This is what somebody said to us in a focus group. If the email isn't saying we're going bust, then I don't care. Now, this is what I mean when I say that people are having to be selfish, or they're choosing to be selfish, and they're deciding to block out anything that isn't directly related to their work. Because really what this guy was saying was, you can send me anything you like on any topic through any channel, But unless it's critical, unless it's telling me the organization's going out of business and we're all losing our jobs, then it's not really going to register. All this guy wanted to know was how to do his job quickly and effectively. He wanted policy updates and things like that that would help him there in that moment. So let's say there was a newsletter that went out and it had a great example of collaboration across different teams. He wouldn't really care, not much interest. Maybe there was a piece going out to say the company's won an award, a big prestigious industry award, the Oscars of the industry. No, didn't really care. Maybe there was a piece going out to say there were free donuts in reception this afternoon. Okay, maybe that might get his attention, but maybe not. And yes, this is quite an extreme example, but we have heard similar sentiments in other projects. So here's one more from a completely different project. This one was from a factory worker, so maybe no great surprise to hear this kind of feedback. But this is also from a focus group. Somebody said, as soon as I enter the factory, I have to start work. I don't have time to log on to a shared computer. And we've heard similar things over the years from ambulance drivers, doctors, nurses, people working in call centers, people working on trains, in coffee shops, in banks, all of these kind of frontline roles. Typically, people will have a quick chat with their team leader or line manager, and off they go. They're straight into their work. So those were a couple of frontline examples. So let's move away from the frontline and hear from somebody working in a desk-based job. So this person was making the most of hybrid working. They were splitting their time between home and office, and they're based in the UK. That's important for context here. Because what they said was, if I finish my work at 6 p.m., do you think I'm going to stay for another 20 minutes to log on to Viva Engage and see what our team in Romania is up to? And again, it wasn't that he didn't particularly care about what was happening in Romania or anybody else, or anywhere else for that matter. But it certainly wasn't a priority. His priority was doing his job and finishing at a decent time. Now here's a quote from another project. Again, this is a desk-based worker. And in a focus group, she said to us, it's exhausting. I just don't have time to learn the new ways of doing things and to complete my work. So straight away, you can see a theme starting to emerge here. These are the kind of pieces of feedback that we're getting from lots and lots of different projects. And I mentioned a couple of minutes ago that this lack of time is causing people to become almost selfish because they just feel they don't have the headspace for anything that doesn't help them in their roles. And here's a classic example of that. This time it's from a survey where somebody wrote, I don't have the time to read about another part of the business. If it's got nothing to do with my job, then I'm not going to pay attention. So you get the idea. So I just want to take a moment to pause before we move on to the next section and look at the clock. So I see I've been speaking in this section for about 6 minutes. So already I've blasted through that 5-minute window that somebody would typically have to look at comms during the day. So just sharing those few quotes with you, that's more time than somebody would have to do all of those things that I talked about, to read a newsletter, to look at their notifications, to go and look at Viva Engage posts. So there's a good chance that much of what we produce is being missed. And it does feel like, from the research and the data that we have, it's getting more difficult to reach people and to give them the information they need to be a connected and engaged employee, to really be an advocate for our business. Because we love those ambassadors who make our lives a little bit easier and support us in the comms work that we're doing. But it does feel like this is getting harder. So back to you, Nick.
So thanks, Paul. So yeah, assuming your 5-minute window is correct, I'm already on borrowed time, so I'll try and be as quick, as concise, and as simple as possible. But let's just look at the impact of what people have said of these focus groups and audits we've been carrying out in recent months, and what are the implications for the business. Let's have a look into that. So, as Paul's already alluded to, one of the things that people have said is they just don't have the headspace for too much communication. It's not like they don't care. It's not like they don't want to know about the organisation. They literally don't have the headspace. They kind of are struggling to cope with, as I said, the workload they're already under. And here's a couple of quotes. If I'm in London, I'm not going to spend time reading a story about Edinburgh. It has to be relevant to me. Time and relevance are really important, and we'll come on to this in more detail. If I see that someone in another team has won an award, I might think that's nice, but I won't go and read the story because I just don't have time. So it's just about time. It's about blocking out, in their views, noise from elsewhere. And I think a lot of what we do, we like to think is great, but a lot of employee base think is just noise. It's also interesting that actually we did come across in the focus groups that some people were actually pretty resentful about some of the communication heading their way, because they can struggle to keep up. And as these quotes again show, I have to log on early and read everything in my own time. I shouldn't have to be doing that. I work in Southampton. Why do I get emails to tell me there are traffic delays in Manchester? People are kind of pretty resentful about this. And in fact, one project we looked at recently, 2/3 of people use their own time to catch up on communication that's been sent to them. They did it because they cared about the business, but there was an area of resentment around it. Why should I be using my own time to catch up on the communication that actually I've been told to read? So there's a resentment coming through. It's not a huge issue, but it's an issue nonetheless. And also, as we've said already, people are just overloaded, and essentially they are deleting as much as possible that they can feel they can get away with. Only a half of people say that the communication they receive is relevant. It's a stat that was also backed up by recent research by Workviva as well. So if only half people think that communication is relevant, why are they going to plough through all of it? There's again 2 quotes here. I've set up an auto delete on the newsletters. It's one less thing to read. If it's important, someone will tell me, usually in person. And yeah, they just delete. And the danger of that is they miss something important. So by not making it relevant, by crowding them with noise, you're running the risk of actually sending communication which is missed because it's deleted. So overloaded, kind of no headspace, resentful. These are all issues that came out during the recent focus groups we carried out. Business implications for that are that we are seeing more and more reliance on line managers to get messages across. Line managers themselves are increasingly overwhelmed themselves. So what's the problem here? Well, if they haven't got time to understand what the company's strategy is or the messages they need to communicate, line managers have low awareness of the key themes. That leads to uneven understanding from line managers, and when they're not communicating that properly, there's resistance to change from across the organisation, which leads to low levels of pride, and with people having to make their own decisions and trying to join the dots from what their managers have said to them, there are slower decisions made at all levels of the business. So the kind of implications of what we said are pretty important for businesses. There's a communications gap that actually is harming productivity and innovation.
Okay, so we talked about the current picture, and hopefully that's resonating with you, or at least some of it is, or maybe it's intrigued you enough to go and carry out your own research to find out if there's a similar scenario within your own organizations. But we'll move on now and think about potential solutions to this challenge. So what we've done is we've grouped our recommendations into 6 key areas that we're calling sprint. So we'll look at how to simplify, prioritize, reinforce, individualize, navigate, and transform. And just for fun, see if you can spot the word that we had to crowbar in just to make the acronym work. It stands out like a sore thumb to me, but it's okay, we can live with it. And it's important to say as we go through these, you don't have to do all of these things that we're going to talk about. We know you guys are short of time as well, but pick out the actions that are most useful and most relevant for you. So first up, how can we simplify our approach to make it easier for people to know where to go for the information they need? And hopefully we can save them some time in the process and help them to use that 5-minute window a bit more efficiently. So yes, our S word is simplify, because before you can move forward, it's worth taking a step back just to think, where are you today? What do you have in place? What tools, channels do you have within your channel mix? And also, what is there that you don't know about? Are there unofficial channels that people have created? They've maybe seen something that they think is a gap, and they've created a tool or a channel to fill that gap, but really it's just adding to the noise. So often when we start a research process, we get a briefing from the comms team and they'll say, this is what we've got. Then we go out and start talking to people and find there's even more that the central team just isn't aware of. And a good way to get a handle on this, it's quite a simple process, but it's very insightful, is to ask a few people to fill out a communications diary just for a week or two. So here's a template for that. This gives you an idea of what that can look like. But all you do is ask people to log their interactions with comms during that period, and you'll get a much clearer idea of what they're actually seeing day to day. So this, of course, is a fictional example. I've just put some random content in here to give you an idea of how it could look. But it tells us a lot. There was one project we worked on last year, and we went through this process, and we counted 18 different newsletters that were going out in one division of a business. That wasn't even the whole business, it was just in one division of it. 18 separate newsletters. And of course, when we went out and spoke to people about them later, we found most of those newsletters were being ignored. So no surprise there. So that's one benefit of going through this process. Something else that the diaries give you is an idea and an understanding of clarifying what people actually see as comms, because that term can be quite vague, it can be quite broad. So if people are logging things, perhaps they're logging emails or newsletters that aren't from the internal comms team or aren't official, but they see them as comms. And that's definitely something to be aware of, because those channels will be influencing your reputation. They'll be influencing how people feel about comms. So this is really the first step. Work out where you are and what you've got. And you can do that in a few different ways. You can carry out a channel review. Full audit is always best if you can, albeit that takes a little bit more time. But if you don't have that level of time or resource, you can try something much smaller like these comms diaries, or even on a much smaller scale than that. Just get your team together for an afternoon, go and have an off-site meeting somewhere out of the usual location, and just go through what you've got. Think about the different tools and channels that you have, how you feel about them, the feedback that you're getting about them. Maybe identify any gaps if you've got those, and just think about where you are today. And that will give you an idea of a starting point at least. Because once you have that understanding, the next step, of course, is to define or to redefine that channel mix. So think about how those different tools and channels fit together. Where can you merge two or more channels to make things a bit easier for your people to simplify that channel mix? Are there any channels that you have that were the right choices when you set them up, maybe 5 years ago, but they're not earning their keep today? Or any gaps that you need to address, any audiences that you're not meeting the needs of, any topics that you're not covering enough? So here's a tip for doing that. This is a tool that we use a lot. It's a model that we use. And this helps us to create a visual channel map. And I'll show you an example on the next slide. But really the idea is to think about the different tools and channels that you have and whether they fit one or more of these three purposes. So first of all, on the left-hand side, is it a tool or a channel that helps people to do their work? So if it is, it'll sit on the left-hand side of this model, of this map, in the purple section under Do. Or is it a channel designed to help people get to the key information that they need, the information that helps them to do their jobs? In which case it will sit in the middle, in the orange section. Or is it more about winning people's hearts? Is it about building a sense of engagement or inspiration? In which case it will sit on the right-hand side under that Feel banner. So let's say you've got an intranet. Almost certainly that will fit into the middle section, the orange section, the Know area, because that's where you'd find the policies and the procedures and the processes and information about the teams and the values and all that kind of stuff. That's usually where it would sit in that middle section. And it's also the place where you'll share announcements and your more practical messages and news updates and things like that. And if you have an enterprise social network, something like a Viva Engage, that kind of platform, that's almost certainly going to sit on the right-hand side in the blue section, because that's about building a sense of peer-to-peer comms and engagement and inspiration. Like I said, it's about winning people's hearts as well as their minds. So once you've been through that process, you've thought about the purpose of each of your tools, you can start to build a map and show where they fit into that model. So here's an example of how that would work. And this is definitely an example of how not to do it. This is how things can go badly wrong over time. This is a channel mix from an organization that we worked with a few years ago. And it's the worst example of this that I've ever seen. Without going into all of the detail, you can see just from how much is on the slide that there are far too many tools and channels here, with lots of them operating in the same spaces. There's so much duplication. And when we went out and spoke to people, we spoke to employees, they were so confused. They didn't know where to go to get information. They didn't know which tools to use. So imagine what it's like in your first week. You're a new recruit. You're just trying to find a bit of information. You're trying to work out what to do. You're looking for a policy, and you've got, in this example, not one, but two intranets to wade through. It's going to take you ages to find that policy. Or you just want to have a call with a colleague or an online meeting. You've got 4 or 5 different tools that can do that. So which one should you use? You don't want to make a mistake in your first couple of days. It's really hard to know what to do. So clearly this is the kind of situation that we want to avoid, because this really is a mess. And what you want, obviously, is a much cleaner, simpler approach. So this is why we make simplify the first step in our process, because simplicity is king here. Make it easy for people to know where to go and what they should expect. So a newsletter comes in, they should know exactly what to expect from that newsletter, because if you're confused as a comms team, you're not sure about how these different pieces fit together, almost certainly your colleagues are going to be even more confused. So over to you, Nick, for the next step of prioritize.
Yes, thanks, Paul. P is for prioritize. And again, we're talking about here a quote from a recent project we worked on. And I think it comes down to this quote, you can read for yourself. It comes down to communicators being able to help employees prioritize what they should or should not be reading. And to my mind, that's quite a simple fix, in theory at least. It's about getting the basics right and being clear about what you're trying to communicate, so that allows employees to prioritize what they want to consume. They can then make their own decision and move on. So it's important that kind of people understand how important the messages are you're communicating. Be really clear. Who is this communication for? Is it for senior leaders? Is it for line managers? Is it for people on a manufacturing site? Is this a need to know, i.e. really important, or is it a nice to know? Is it a need to know piece around, organizational restructuring and how that might impact your role? Or is it a nice to know around, the fact that we've won an award, or there's a charity cake bake day? So how important is it? Most of all, what should I do with the information? So we've been really clear about, with calls to action for employees, when they've read the information, what to do with it. Do they do anything with it at all, or do they just file it in their heads? Be really clear about what they need to do with the information once they've read it. Slide. And they make it really clear as well about what bucket it falls into in terms of communication. So is it an awareness piece? Is it, for example, awareness of, say, new resources for you doing your everyday job? Is it an understanding piece of, say, your company strategy? Or is it a piece that's going to inspire people to, for example, sign up for a fun run, or a perhaps more, not so much fun, an HR training module? It's kind of dropping it into buckets that people can then prioritize and kind of work out for themselves what they want to read, and kind of the importance of the messages that's coming through. So awareness, understanding, and inspiration. And we've seen this, you've probably seen this on a number of social channels. And in fact, I think a couple of our daily newspapers put this on their websites. But essentially, a lot of people say on the comments under the stories, TLDR, too long, didn't read. So again, it comes back to brevity, clarity, simplicity, and giving people the chance to prioritize what they want to read. If you make it over long, people are going to turn off. They're not going to read beyond your first paragraph, perhaps. So just be clear when we'll come to this later. Be clear about when you're writing content that actually people don't have the time to read your carefully crafted 15 paragraphs. They might just want a 1 paragraph summary. So TLDR, if you see that after anything you've written, you know you failed.
Okay, so we're sprinting ourselves now as we move on to reinforce. And this step is, as the title suggests, about reinforcing key messages, but it's about doing it through people, not just through platforms, because as a comms team, you can't do everything yourselves. You may even be a team of one trying to do everything as an individual. We talked a lot about lack of time today, but of course it's the same challenge for most comms teams as well. So where can you get that extra bit of support that can make a difference to you? So before I give you an idea, I want to share some stats from the last 3 research projects that I've worked on. So we've got some genuine data here from the last 3 projects that we've done. And here we've got stats from 3 different organizations. The blue bars show the satisfaction score for the highest performing channel within that organization, so the most popular channel. The orange bars show the satisfaction score for the lowest performing channel within that organization. So for instance, on the left-hand side with our first company, the highest rated channel had a 94% satisfaction score. So in other words, 94% of our survey respondents rated that channel positively. We asked them to rate it from 1 to 5, and 94% of them gave it either a 4 out of 5 or a 5 out of 5. And in that same company, the lowest rated channel had a 50% satisfaction score. So half of our survey respondents were happy with that one. And you can see for the blue scores, they go from 94 to 88. So those are all amazing scores. We rarely see scores around those levels. So if you've got anything in that region, you're doing very well indeed. The orange bars for the least popular channels go as low as 27%. And I'll let you into a little industry secret. 27% isn't very good. So if you have any scores in that area, it's something that you need to do a bit of work on, or maybe kill entirely, because it's just not worth keeping it. It's not the worst I've ever seen. I did see a channel once with a 9% satisfaction score. So basically everybody hated that one, but 27% is pretty bad. But clearly from these bars, you can see there's a big gap between the highest and the lowest rated channels, which you would expect, so not a surprise there. But what the data showed us, and this is what was really stark from this data, is that all of those blue bars, the highest performing channels, they're all human channels. They're all about line manager comms. So that could be team meetings or one-to-one conversations. But the most popular channels in these 3 organizations getting these amazing scores were all human ones. And the least popular ones, the orange bars, they were all digital channels, either the intranet or a social platform. And actually 50% or thereabouts for an intranet isn't a bad score. Looking back at the averages that we've seen over the last 15, 16 years, if you can have more than half of your people happy with your intranet, you're actually doing a really good job. People have such different expectations from their intranet. It's really hard to make everybody happy. So if you're above 50%, you're actually doing fairly well. So it's not the end of the world, but there's clearly a big contrast between those human channels and those digital channels here. And of course, we've known for a long time that people often prefer to hear information from their line manager, and that line manager community is crucial in every organization. But it was really striking for us to see this laid out so clearly in our recent survey data. So yes, starting with your line manager community is an excellent first step in developing your reach as a comms team, because those managers can reinforce the key messages. They can make sure that people haven't missed those crucial pieces of information. They can translate the wider business messages to make them more meaningful at a local level. And they can feed back as well. They can let you know how things are being received on the ground. But something we often hear in our research projects is that those same line managers are crying out for support. They tell us time and time again that they just don't feel like they have the tools or the skills or the confidence, the resources. They just don't have what they need to have more productive, more effective conversations with their people. Either that's in a group setting like a team meeting or a team huddle, or in a one-to-one conversation. So they say they need support. They want comms training. They need guidance to help them translate information, to write more effectively, to be better listeners, to really understand what their people want and need, to speak and present with more empathy or more authority depending on the situation. So training is one option, but also something else that we hear a lot is that people line managers want a central source of truth. They want a one-stop shop, somewhere where they can go and they can find the templates and the resources that they need. They can get those training materials. They can learn from each other. They can build that sense of community and learn from each other's experiences. They can ask each other questions. And often we find in our survey analysis, when we look at the data and how people feel about communication overall, often line manager communication is the key factor. So it's definitely well worth investing in this community, because as our data shows, it really does make a big difference to how people feel about communication within the organization as a whole. Back to you, Nick.
So in Sprint is for individualized, and you can see that actually this is the letter that we've actually kind of been a bit disingenuous with, because we should have called it tailor or personalized, but that wouldn't spell out Sprint. So we call it individualized, and bear with us, please. There's a lag between what employees experience in and out of work, we've found from focus groups. And in fact, it lends itself to the old joke, you're now entering the corporate workplace, please put your clocks back 10 years. Effectively, what we need to do as communicators in the internal comms industry is really understand our employees and how they're consuming content from when they're at home, essentially. So what technology are they using, what tools are they using, how are they consuming content, and why is it that they will more likely to read that than they would perhaps say all company email? I think we know the answers, but effectively the research we carry out with these people does give us a window into their world, and kind of by understanding how they consume content at home, it gives us an idea on how we can approach our own communication in an internal setting. As an example, next slide. As an example, here's a kind of a piece of tailored content from Netflix. So you'll be aware of kind of how when you're at home, you will sign up to a TV station or a sports team, or whatever it happens to be, whatever your interest would be. What you'll receive as communication is very much tailored and personalized to you. It's not one size fits all. It's based on algorithms, obviously, but also based on your preferences and how you want to consume content. So in terms of an internal comm setting, it's important, I think, we understand what people are interested in, do that research that Paul's talked about, understand that some people will be interested in a particular subject or not on others, and personalize this as much as possible, that so what they get is relevant. What we're hearing from people is that they don't want more communication, they want more relevant communication, and personalizing it, tailoring it is really important when it comes to that. If we're just sending out mass communication to everyone, the chances are they will hit that delete button, and then your important messages will be lost. So let's personalize, let's tailor, and let's really understand what your people really want from communication at work. So doing that in terms of research. So what are the touch points during the day? So I'm a great believer in actually walking the talk and kind of following the footsteps of employees, spending some time at a warehouse or in a manufacturing site or head office, wherever it might be. Where are they walking? Where are they kind of meeting people? Where are they having lunch? Where are their touch points during the day when you can get hold of them? It's really important to understand their personal journeys. What are they trying to achieve in their role? What's their kind of what's their reason for getting out of bed? What have they been judged on? What are their KPIs? How can we help them to achieve that? And what information do they need to achieve that? What's really helpful? Again, we're going back to the nice to have and the need to know. The need to know is going to help them achieve what they want to do as an employee. The nice to have won't necessarily do that. Where do they get their information from? Some people will be on their mobile phones all day. Some people will look at a digital screen. Some people look at the internet. Some might prefer, kind of notice board. There are different ways to consume content, but let's actually drill down. Where do they get the information from, and where are they most likely to access it to? And again, what digital tools do they have access to? It's all very well saying, well, all the information is available for everyone. It's not. We know that from our research. People do not always have access to the information that we think they do. So what tools give them access, and actually what tools do they actually want to use? What are the most user-friendly tools out there? The world of digital tools is changing all the time. We see it at SQL every week. Every week something new is happening. So we need to keep up to date with that and understand what tools people actually want to use rather than what we think they want to use. We need to do less presuming and more kind of research. And from our research, a lot frustrates people. So what does frustrate people? What does get in their way? What kind of annoys them? What fuels that resentment we talked about earlier? If we can drill down into that and understand what they don't want, that's also really useful. What do they want more of? What do they want less of? I think by doing the research and kind of understanding your audiences, your tribes, what do you call them, goes a long way towards giving you a framework for communication you want to kind of provide to them.
Okay, so nearly there now. So we'll have a think about how to help people navigate through this challenge. And we talked about sending out information in a strategic and a more focused way. But what about the information that people are actually wanting to seek out for themselves? And particularly that will be on the intranet. And a common complaint that we hear is that it just takes too long for people to find what they need. And this is often where time is won and lost during the course of a week. This is something you can test really quickly. You can do a very simple test. If you get a handful of willing volunteers together, just give them a few pieces of content to find and just see how long it takes them to get there. And this is something that we often do in intranet workshops and comms workshops. Like I say, really simple process, but it's very insightful. We had a session last week where we had 12 people in our group, and we asked them to find a page on their intranet that had travel information on there. We'd seen this page as part of our preparation and our research a few days before, and it had all the things you'd expect. It had information about the nearest train station and parking options and bus routes and all this kind of stuff. So really helpful page. But in our workshop, not a single person could find it. Nobody could track it down. We ended up giving them 5 minutes, and yet nobody could find it at all. So there was their 5-minute window for the day, just gone on one task, and a task they didn't even complete. And this is something that we hear a lot. It's a really common piece of feedback from these workshops and these sessions. So there are a couple of things that you can do to avoid this scenario. First of all, thinking about your intranet structure and making sure that it's relevant and appropriate to the organization that you are today. Is it logical? Is it simple for people to use? Again, we come back to that word of simplicity. So important. This is what people tell us is important to them. Again, think about what it's like as a new recruit. If you are trying to find some information in your first few days, would it be easy to track down that page with the travel information, or to find a policy or catch up on the news that you've missed while you were away on holiday? And the second part is focusing on governance. That's the rules for your intranet and for all your channels, really. And we acknowledge it's not the most exciting part of your job. There are other things that are like to be much more fun than thinking about intranet rules, but they are so crucial in keeping your content well organized and up to date and helping people to use their time well. It's also really important in terms of building trust, because something we hear a lot is that even when people can track down information, they don't always trust it because they're never quite sure. Is it the most recent version of that document? Has the page been updated recently? Or is it just old content that nobody's touched in a while? And we've seen some quite extreme examples of that. We had a project not too long ago where we stumbled across part of an intranet that was all about a section of a business that had been sold 15 years earlier, been gone for 15 years, but there was a huge section of the intranet still there, all about that part of the business, clogging up the search functionality and getting in everybody's way. So the solution here is to define those rules. And you can see some suggestions on the slide, things that you can ask, particularly around ownership of that content. That's a real common issue. What happens when a content owner leaves? Somebody's been looking after a section of the site for a few years. They move to a different department or leave the company entirely, and that section just falls into disrepair. Nobody takes over ownership of that. And really, all of these actions are about making it quicker and easier for people to get to the content that's important to them. So when they have that 5-minute window, when they're looking for something that's really important to them in that moment, we can help them to use that time more effectively and more efficiently. Back to you, Nick.
Okay, so the last T in Sprint transform, and I have a confession to start with. I'm a journalist, and until recently, I was under the misapprehension that readers would actually cling onto every word I'd written. Every carefully crafted piece of content was going to be read in full by employees across businesses. I now know, of course, that's not true, particularly in these days when AI, and yes, we're coming to AI, sorry, but it's going to be here for good. AI is kind of changing the way we write content. So we're not now writing for people to read long swathes of content. We're writing so that AI can actually use our content to spit it out and make it interesting for and simple and brief for our employees. So AI picks out content which is obviously has explicit statements, clear outcomes, and asks questions. And again, this does go back to journalistic roots about the who, what, when, why, how, and where of any story. So who's this for? Why is it happening? When's it happening? What is happening? How is it happening, and where? So very simple statements, very clear calls to action are the way that we're going to be writing in the future. So it's all very well writing, and we do hope that some people will read long draft content, great, but actually the world is changing and most people are, as we've said already, time pressed and need to consume content in a very easy and simple manner. In fact, next slide. If you can't describe the message in one sentence, then Copilot can't either. I'm making the point there that if you can boil your content down to be easily understandable by AI, then what that spits out with internal AI channels will be easily understandable for your employees as well. So just let's take a look at the way we write. Let's not fool ourselves that people want 25-page summaries of articles. They want 1 or 2 paragraphs because they are time pressed. They do need to have a call to action. They need to kind of have content which is relevant and to prioritize what they read. So the way we're writing is different, and we'll have to acknowledge that as the years go by. However, writing is not the only way we can communicate either. So let's also think about other ways we can communicate. So we've seen a sequel, a certain rise in 60-second films, for example, and audio clips, and other ways to get a message across. So again, the world is changing. These new ways of communicating are simpler, easy to understand, easier to consume, and in line with what people are finding outside work. So the world is transforming. As communicators, we need to transform too. And if we do, then obviously kind of some of the research we've found recently, some of the results hopefully won't be quite as damning as they have been in the last 6 months or so.
So yeah, if we pull all of this together, what we're really saying is that the behavior that we've talked about today and the research that we've shared about people filtering and skimming, deleting, even opting out at times, all of that, when you look at it, it's completely rational from an individual point of view. People are so pushed for time. They're so focused on doing their work that they're essentially doing what they have to do to cope and to keep up. But if lots of people make those choices, even if they are sensible choices, for them anyway, the organization can end up with people who are less informed, maybe underinformed, less confident about joining the dots, less able to act as those advocates for the business that we love. And so the risk isn't really that people aren't reading every message we send, because that's always going to be very, very difficult, if not impossible. The risk is that they miss the important ones. Those things that really help them to understand priorities, to make better decisions, and to feel connected to what the organization is trying to achieve. So really that's why the actions we've covered today are about making it quicker and easier for people, making it easier to spot what's relevant for them, to understand why that matters, why they should pay attention, and also to know what to do with it. You've got this information, you shared it with me. What am I supposed to do with it? What is the action that you want to see from me? So 3 things that you can do quickly, even this afternoon, to change the way that you approach your communication. Put that 30-second version at the top, as Nick was talking about. Really make it easy for people to see what that piece is about. Yeah, if people want to read the longer version, that's brilliant. But for those who are just skipping through, at least we know they've got the basics. Improve the signposting as well. Make it really clear for people. Is this something they need to know, or just something that it's quite nice to know? We'd love it if they read it, but it's not the end of the world if they don't. And what should they do with that information once they do have it? And think about where you are at the moment. So plan a review or an audit, comms diaries, or just a one-off session with your team to help you understand what you've got and help you to simplify your channel mix. Because let's be honest, unless you're very, very lucky, you're not going to be able to magic up more time for people to read those comms messages. So we have to help people to use that 5-minute window efficiently and cleverly. And hopefully they'll be supported by some amazing line managers who reinforce those key messages and help to distill that crucial information and make sure that important messages aren't missed. So really the goal is fewer people missing the things that really matter. So there we go. That's all from us for now. We've spoken for a lot longer than 5-minute window, so thanks for listening. Do feel free to get in touch through our socials. You can connect with us here using these links, and we'd love to help you understand the challenges that you have within your organizations and use our experience to support you as you tackle those challenges. But that's it from us. Andrew, back to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's, in many ways, it's such a basic topic, isn't it, to talk about in terms of time available for people to do stuff. But I think it's a really important thing to talk about in terms of the value of communications work that's taking place. I particularly love the fact that we've been talking today about research that you've conducted. So actually, rather than having a conversation based on gut feel and just personal experience, actually to be able to do it based on research that you've conducted over many years from many different organizations, I think is really helpful. And I'm sure there's stuff here for people to take away. If people have got questions, do throw them into the chat. We have got one here actually, which I think is quite an interesting question. Because I do think it's one that a lot of people might state. I'm not sure whether you can see it, but the question says, isn't this just about organizations and therefore business leaders not giving people enough time to do or to read the communications that they are given? And I think this is a really interesting question in a way, because it's the realities of, I'm paraphrasing this, is it big bad leaders, big bad business that aren't being fair, or is it actually just the challenge of running an organization and actually people not having enough time, no matter how much time we would like to give them in theory? Any particular views on that, and whether this is an industry issue or whether it's just a general business issue?
Well, shall I go first, Paul?
Yeah,
It's a really interesting question, you said, Andrew. And in fact, one of the projects we carried out recently, one of the things that came out was that people liked team huddles, but they didn't have the time to do them. They needed another 10 minutes in the day or whatever, 15 minutes, and they were keen to have more huddles. But when we mentioned or discussed that with the comms team, it was very much a case of, we're not going to be asking our senior leaders for more time because that's going to hurt productivity. So there is a big issue there around leaders, and they're probably their emphasis on communications, the importance it is. When it comes to the crunch, are they going to give us another 5 minutes for a comms huddle, or are they going to demand that those 5 minutes are spent churning out widgets or whatever it should be? So I think it's a really good question. I'm not sure many businesses will probably go for the former. They'll probably concentrate on the latter. Is that your experience, Paul?
Yeah, it's expensive, isn't it, to free up that time for people. I think, as in so many options, measurement is probably the key here, because to go back to what Nick was saying earlier about the purpose of communications, is it about raising awareness of something? Is it about building understanding of a topic? Is it about inspiring people to go and do something? If we can measure those actions, then that shows the impact of people not having the information that they need. Often we'll ask people if they would feel comfortable sharing the business strategy with a new starter or something like that. And the feedback is often, I could probably explain my local business strategy or what my team does, but it'd be a lot harder to explain what the company does overall. So at least if you've got the measurement around that and you can show that there's a lack of understanding or you're not having the impact that you want, that might give you something in your corner to try to get a little bit more time. But yeah, the bottom line is it's always going to be expensive.
And the bigger issue there, Andrew, of course, is, as we always face as internal comms people, how much is internal comms valued at the end of the day? What kind of investment do businesses want to put into what we do?
Yeah. And just building on that, it's coming back to this idea that line managers are a great place to a great channel to deliver comms through. We've seen that time and time again. We've probably talked about this many times in many different environments. But yet again, what we're looking at here, based on your research, the blue columns, the personal, the human channels, and the orange columns that aren't. There is a danger that line managers are already overloaded, but yet again, we're looking at them as a channel to improve delivery. How do we tackle that? They're already overloaded. Is there sort of a practical step that you would recommend your clients take or you see happening?
Yeah, I think it's about making their lives a little bit easier. So it's not necessarily about asking them to do more. It's probably about making it easier for them to do what they're hopefully already doing. So, things we talked about, like the communications training, helping them to take the messages and communicate them with their teams. I've seen so many examples, I'm sure you guys have as well, of managers who are so lacking in confidence, sometimes skills, sometimes that they get the briefing notes from HR or the comms team and they just forward them on to their team and say, there you go, read that. Okay, I've communicated, I can tick that box. Or they print it out and stick it on the notice board, and same kind of approach. So those managers need help and guidance. That's what they tell us. Often they're not, they don't have training up to that point. It's the cliche, isn't it? They get promoted because they're the best engineer or the best scientist or whatever. There's often less thought around communication skills. So yeah, it's something we hear a lot. They're really crying out for that support, and it's not necessarily about doing more, but it's about using that time more effectively.
And I think it's also about, as well as giving them help and guidance, Andrew, it's also about, we've seen with some clients, giving them communications almost like as a KPI and to be measured against, and therefore being part of their job role, which is actually carving out something which isn't just an add-on, but which is a central part of what they do. And that I think works better. Not many organizations do that, however.
Yeah, and actually that's an interesting point, because Jennifer has raised a point here about, in some organisations, I would think about some of the professional services firms or legal firms that we work with, everything is billable hours and timesheets and those sorts of things. And to your point, Nick, if the KPI, if it's all about billable hours and not about comms delivery as a manager, then you're sort of up against it a little bit. But there's another question here, which I think is really interesting, because you talked about individualizing. I think that was the word, not one that I use often, but I think that's what it was. How do you achieve that level of individualization, personalization? Is that through tech? Is it, what would you be recommending to your clients about how to achieve that? Because I think it's an important point.
Yeah, it's a bit of a blend of tech and audience understanding, because you can't really have one without the other. And it's not easy. I'll be honest, it's really tough. It's amazing how often we'll talk to a comms or an HR team at the start of a project and say, okay, tell us about your audiences. What are your different employee groups? And they don't really know. They know the people that they work with, but they just don't have that data. So without data, it's really difficult. You can start to build some different personas. And even if you do something as basic as splitting out based on people's locations or their roles, it all gets away from the idea of sending everything to everyone all the time. That's the mantra to keep in mind. If you can just take baby steps away from that, at least you're heading in the right direction. But you've got to have that audience understanding first to do that, and then apply it through the technology. So it's getting better all the time. There are platforms like Halo and WorkVivo and Viva Connections, Viva Engage as well, that help you to send different things to different people, or making it so people can sign up to the topics that they're interested in and ignore the others. So yeah, I think it's really a blend of audience understanding and technology, but without that audience understanding, you're a bit stuck. So it's well worth investing the time to build out those personas.
Yeah. Okay. And one final quick question, maybe a quick answer on this, mindful of time, but I think, as you've highlighted, I'm sure many people listening realize themselves that they have this challenge that people have now turned off. So you've got people that are automatically deleting. How do you get those people back? How do you get them re-engaged when you've kind of lost them? And those are my words. You've kind of lost them. How do you get them re-engaged? Is that line managers again, or is it? I mean, what's the one practical step? A quick summary on that.
Yeah, for me, I think it is the line managers. And to be honest, there may be some audiences where you're okay with letting them go if you've got a lot of students who just come and work over the summer, or seasonal workers, or depending on the type of role, it may be okay in some circumstances. You're not going to make everybody an amazing, engaged advocate. But yeah, I think that the line managers are key, and sometimes a little bit of communication by stealth as well, because there are always things that people need to do online. They need to log that timesheet, or book holiday, or book a meeting room. Maybe you can take that opportunity to just share one little line, one nugget of information that they'll see as they go and carry out that task that they have to do. And that's better than them not seeing it at all.
Yeah, I think again, it's kind of on piggybacking on their journey in work. So all those points we talk about where they might consume content, as Paul said, by stealth, perhaps just reintroduce some content at those places. So that might be on the back of a payslip, or it might be on a pallet, back of a toilet door, whatever it takes to try and just do it by stealth. But at the end of the day, as Paul said, we don't necessarily want everyone to read everything. So some people you can lose, but obviously the thing we don't want to lose is those that must know information.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you so much, guys, for going through all of that. I'm talking about time. I'm mindful of time. There's probably a million questions that we could go through, and people would love to ask. If you haven't had a chance to ask a question, you'd like to know more, as I say, please do reach out to Nick and Paul. I've known them a while. They are lovely guys, as you can see, and I'm sure they'd be very happy to take questions offline, as we say. And I'm sure there's many comms channels. You can LinkedIn, email them, telephone them, many ways that you can choose to do that in terms of talking about comms channels. But thanks to everyone that's listened in this afternoon. We will be running other webinars in the future. I'm sure we'll be speaking to SQL Group again. So they've always got lots of useful insight to share. So everyone that's listened in, I hope you found it helpful. I hope there's some useful learns to take away. Please do follow up and look at the video again if you wish, and drop us a line if you've got any feedback for us. If there's things you'd like us to talk about in the future, perhaps things you'd like us to talk about with SQL in the future, then please do let us know. But enjoy the rest of your day, and one way or another, hopefully we'll see you all soon. Many thanks.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.